Hello and welcome to the Coaching Crowd podcast with me, Zoe Hawkins, and my friend and co-host Joe Wheatley.
Hi, everybody. Today we are talking to you about coaching and burnout. And the reason that we're talking to you about this is burnout is actually fairly common, and you probably are coaching clients at the moment who probably exhibit signs of burnout. So, in today's podcast, we're going to talk to you about what is burnout, what might you notice in coaching sessions, what can you do to support clients with burnout.
And I think there's two aspects to this, isn't there? Because you've got the clients who may be concerned they are running close to burnout. So they are still in a place where they are, the word functional came to mind, which isn't a word that I like, but they are functioning in their life. They are turning up to work, they are on time, they may be working late and long hours, but they aren't having a breakdown or they aren't having a burnout, but they are aware that they're approaching it. And I think that's really common in coaching. And then there's the other category, which are clients who find themselves in burnout. And that really is a different entity because the client is in burnout. Traditional coaching, like what are you going to do about it? Like action steps aren't really going to land as well as somebody who may be approaching burnout because the capacity to take action, the capacity to be sort of proactive and do things just isn't going to be there in the same extent. So I think we've got these two different worlds really to explore.
Yeah. And I think, what you might, what are the reasons that people might be coming up against burnout? And, it could be because something has changed in their life. So something that used to be, life used to be manageable or their role used to be manageable, but something has changed and now that balance is a bit out of kilter. That could be, for example, a loved one getting very unwell and they're trying to, support and deal with that emotionally as well as practically, whilst also keeping all of those other plates spinning. Sometimes it could be maybe some things from the past that haven't been dealt with that actually start to, come back to them, or at a point where they start to process it and maybe they're not kind of, ready for those things. It could be because when they were growing up, they were brought up somehow with this narrative or this belief that you must work hard. It's really important to work hard, and that working hard, they have always done that, but somehow without realizing it, they've kind of actually they're overworking in terms of the fit for the things in their lives.
I think in simplistic terms, it's about that cup, isn't it? And
Mm,
how full the cup is. And
mm.
some people, I think of burnout as you have been living life, when you're carrying like a really hot cup of tea on a saucer. I think this is old school.
I mean,
And it's
we
sort of,
don't because we
we
don't drink
don't.
tea and coffee.
True. Okay, but most of the
Yeah.
UK population anyway do. But imagine you're carrying a hot cup of tea or whatever on a saucer and you're walking and you're trying really hard not to spill it over the edges, and sometimes you're okay, like you don't really spill it, but then there are other times where it's sloshing everywhere. I think burnout metaphorically is like you've been trying for a really long time to carry this cup of tea really gently, and no matter what you do now, it's sloshing over the sides everywhere and, sort of creating a mess. And so burnout is often a symptom of having been strong for a really long time and not having had the support that you need for a really long time. So yes, there can be things that are different, but it can just be
Mm,
every day. Like every day
mm,
you've been managing, every day you've been surviving, every day you've been coping, but you haven't been able to step into a space where you've been thriving and having a bit more sort of equilibrium in your life with all the different things that might fill your life up. So often, that's why burnout can sort of sneak up on people. Is sometimes it's not that anything has changed, it's just that they're exhausted from having tried for so long. So there's
mm.
no assumptions, I think, as to why burnout may be present in a client when they show up in coaching. What you can do is just bring curiosity and a listening ear, and you may hear clients say things like, I just feel like I'm burning out. I just feel exhausted all the time. So, you need to really pay attention to the signs. If you're working with somebody over a period of time, you may find that every session they arrive at, they're arriving at and they don't have clarity of mind. They don't bring things to focus on. They arrive and they're flustered. They can't focus on taking action or doing goals. They're literally just turning up to the session, winding the clock down, and doing the same thing in the next session. Whereas a client who is more able, you will be seeing signs of progress. You will be seeing that the goals are being achieved. They will be having moments in the session where like, oh, that's really useful. Yes, I'm going to do that. Whereas clients who are in burnout are more likely to just be putting one step, that all their energy is going into kind of that one step in front of the other.
Or they could be saying, yeah, that sounds like it could be, saying yes all the time, because one of the things that can lead to burnout is not having boundaries, not used to saying no, or not knowing how to say no. Not, and also something that can lead to burnout is being in a role for whatever period of time that actually doesn't have any meaning for you. And that can happen, not necessarily through intent, because a lot of people don't know about their values, things that we work on in coaching. And so, their focus is on getting a job that's going to pay the bills and enable them to do the things that they want. And that works for, well, for a period of time. But then the longer they're in the role, the more they just start to feel a bit empty, dull, like bored, unfulfilled. And burnout, I think, can also happen because when you're not living your life in a way that feels that it has meaning and purpose in the way that's important for you. And obviously it's different for all of us. So all of those things for those of us that are coaches will think, oh yeah, values work I could do, beliefs work I can do. Oh, so actually the client, when they come to the session, I need to, we need to be aware that what the client comes with and wants to work on, that may not actually be the starting point in coaching. So in order to get to that goal, there may be some other work that needs to be done. For example, if somebody is right on that edge of burnout, to help them to be able to get to a place where they're feeling more resourced, rather than feeling so stretched thin that holes are starting to appear in it, and actually to be able to get back to a place where that material, if you like, has got some give, and it's got its elasticity, and it's got its moisture, its feet, it's got a lot left in it. And like all of us will experience points in our life where we get closer to burnout. And of course, lots of people unfortunately do actually, burnout is a very serious thing for anybody that actually has experienced burnout. And it can take a lot of time to recover from burnout.
And I think that's the ethical question is, do you coach clients when they are in burnout? And I think this is actually a really interesting question to explore, because one person's burnout may be different to another person's burnout, where somebody may say they are burning out, maybe they are approaching it, or maybe they are actually entering into a recovery phase. Like there will be a piece in the middle where your client needs to probably strip back in life and down tools and rest and recuperate, probably under the care of medical professionals. Is it appropriate at that point to coach them? And the question really is to your client around what would be the focus of this coaching. If we were to engage in coaching whilst you are experiencing burnout, what is the focus of the coaching? What do you want to get out of it? Where would this be helpful for you? Where might this not be helpful for you? Because there's an argument that it might put too much pressure on the client. It's another thing they feel like they need to do to please you as the coach, to honor the actions that they agree to for the sake of the coaching relationship. That may be something that is unhelpful to a client in burnout. Or they may find that having that space to really think about, okay, how did I get here and where am I going next? So for you, Joe, as you said, like if they're living life in a way that is not meeting their values, they may find actually coaching whilst they're in this recovery or in this phase actually really helpful to get in touch with, okay, so what needs to change? In order for me to get better, what needs to change? So I don't think it's a simple, no, we don't coach clients in burnout, or yes, you can coach clients in burnout. It's like, how is the client? What do they want? What do they need? And how might the coaching support them? And then it's coming back to, am I am I the right coach? Am I competent to be able to offer that service to this client when they're in this place?
Yeah. And I was just those of you that are watching on YouTube would see, what is she doing? I was looking for some notes because I just what came into my mind is I remember reading something that talked about rest, as you kind of mentioning that word rest. It was talking about rest as being an act of rebellion in like today's society because we aren't really conditioned to see value in rest. Like a lot of conversations, how are you? Really busy. And it's like, oh yeah, well, yeah, gosh, life's just so busy, isn't it? And I was just trying to see if I could find the reference for that because I remember thinking, wow, that's just so powerful to just pause for a minute and think about what's my own relationship to rest.
Mm.
Do I value it? Do I know how I do that well for me? Um, do I encourage others around me and support other people around me to do that? And could I do that actually even better? And I was also thinking about how when you were describing people, coaches saying, I just feel so exhausted. That word "just" is
Mm.
just a real telltale piece, really. And I was thinking about how other risk factors, if you like, for burnout can be sometimes when you believe in something so much that you end up sacrificing your own well-being for it. So look, we run our own business. We totally believe in it. It is created around strong passion and belief around coaching and what we feel it can help and support people to do and the values that we hold that honors. And so we are very aware, aren't we, of how close we can get when we are so wrapped up in in what we want to create. And I think that isn't always talked about.
I think it's about being aware of your patterns, isn't it? And that's one thing that coaching can do with clients is to help them become aware of their patterns. So I know one of the patterns that I have to be very conscious of is that when I am uh, feeling stressed, I do more and I ask for help less. That's my pattern. And so in business, as you're referring to there, Joe, if business is busy and there's lots going on and we've got lots of projects, instead of like taking a step back and prioritizing and thinking about what's important, I'll open the laptop up late at night and I'll crack out more things in a false sense of achievement. And so, you really have to catch yourself around what are the patterns? Have I fallen into one? And I think that's a really great space for coaching because you can't change what you can't see. And when a coach is able to, observe the different behaviors, perhaps the different decisions you're making and share them and then help you to think about, so what do I want to do differently? How do I want to be differently? It's creating a pause in a sea of calm that can help you to change, the way that you are. And I don't think some of that stuff is necessarily overnight stuff, and you can always fall back into a well-established pattern, but you're more likely to see yourself when you're in it, and you're more likely to be resourced to be able to do something with it.
And so as a coach, you can ask people, how close are you to burnout? Like that's quite an arresting question to be on the receiving end of if you have a level of knowledge that you are some way along that pathway.
Well, there's a presupposition in that question, isn't there? So it's got to be used carefully. So the
Hmm.
presupposition in that question is that they are close to burnout. So as
Hmm.
Joe said, it's an arresting question. It's one of those questions you would ask your client when the evidence that they are giving you suggests that they are ignoring their own signs and symptoms and plowing on regardless. And so what you're essentially saying to your client there is like, I can see, or I think that you are close to burnout. So I want you to have a look yourself and decide for yourself how close or not are you, because they can always reject the question. A client might come back and say, no, it's not burnout, but I am stressed.
And you can link it into the patterns. That's the
Mm.
thing, is because if the client says, oh, that's really you've got me there, and then you go, okay, so where is there?
Mm.
They can talk a bit more about that. Then you can work out a plan. Or they might say, no, I'm not close to burnout. Say, okay, so if burnout's at one end of a continuum, what's at the other end? Even that's interesting because those of you that are listening you'll have your word in your head, which might be different to the word I have in my mind at the other end of that and the word that Zoe has. And they might say they're partly away. And then you might ask them about, like, what are your patterns? What is the sequence? What are the other things that you feel or might notice along that way? Especially if I think one of our roles as coaches is, clients will have their goals, but there is that kind of holistic overall well-being. It's not achieve the goal at the expense of everything else or the client's well-being as well. So, maybe have take some time to reflect around what questions do you currently ask in your coaching practice or the conversations you have with people about well-being, and how do you respond when somebody says, oh God, I'm just so stressed. Like, do you accept that as a normal
Mm.
around that? And also when we use those terms, is that what we mean? So, there is an element of duty of care that we have as coaches in the relationships that we have with our clients, not in a parent-child way, obviously, in an adult-to-adult way. But if the things that we were talking about earlier, like people pleasing, for example, so if you notice that in your client, that might be an indicator that they're not prioritizing themselves. They are putting other people's needs before those things. I gave the example of when you're, super, super passionate about something, or clients find it difficult to say no.
Mm. Burnout, I think, is one of those things that is, as you said, we may all be at risk of it, but it's the language that you use about it. Burnout can sound very scary, but when
Mm.
you put it in the context of well-being, so the question you posed was, how close are you to burnout? You could simply ask a question, how well are you? How is your well-being right now? You could ask around, when was the last time you felt peaceful? Or how much rest are you getting as you achieve this goal? There's lots of different ways you can explore the topic of burnout without necessarily having to label it, because you may be a coach who you don't feel like your client is there, but there's
Yeah.
there's some suspicion, or there's some kind of clues that there's something going on around it. So you don't have to label it as burnout. You can simply create a space for the client to be able to explore, how are they feeling? Because I think one of the things with burnout is you don't get that helicopter view. You're very much in
Yeah.
the hamster wheel. And so when you come to coaching, it's an opportunity to get off the wheel and just take a look, you know.
I was just, when you were talking about the word burnout, and I was thinking, in coaching, it's like, what is it that is burning out?
Mm. Yeah, you mentioned earlier something around, I think you were working a metaphor talking about light and moisture and things. And
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking around, for me, it's the spark, it's where the fire is dwindling. And sometimes you've just got burning in the embers. And yeah, you need to blow on it to like kind of reignite it. And it's like, what is that piece that's going to reignite the spark? Like, that's metaphorically how I sort of think of burnout, literally as a burning out, right? Like,
I think what we're saying here is, if you're supporting with a client who is not prioritizing their own needs, and maybe are not even fully aware of their own needs, they somehow have got disconnected from
mm,
themselves, then it's not all about helping them to put strategies in place to address those things. That's a very almost transactional way of approaching this. So some of the questions, the one or two questions that we're dropping in here, is actually just taking the time to be with and understand what these things are and what these experiences could be, and what these things mean for them.
mm,
Because we all know on some level, like, the things that are good for us, and if somebody starts talking about sleep, like, that wouldn't engage me, for example, as a client. Like, how much sleep are you getting? I'd be like, well, don't sleep that, sleep isn't that great. Da, 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 da. It's like stuff I feel that I know. When I come to coaching, I want to be stimulated to think about different perspectives on things And now I'm not every client, but just for those of you that are listening, make sure, I mean, we would encourage you in your approach to coaching to think about, have you got confidence and ways to engage and support clients around these things, everything from the practical all the way through to the more philosophical, if you like, because when it comes to people's needs, you know, they've got practical needs, they've got spiritual needs, they've got financial needs, etc., etc. So even helping people to really break down and identify what those things are can be really helpful before getting into, supporting them with the plan around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you would have heard if you're a regular listener about our emotions coaching practitioner training. And there's some really great thought provocation in there and tools and resources to support clients. Because obviously, when you're talking about a topic like burnout, what you're talking about are lots of different emotions that are present. And so being able to support clients with their emotions is a big part of being able to coach people around and with this topic. So come and explore that. Sorry,
I
Joe,
was
you're
just
going to say something?
I was just thinking as well about how group and team coaching. I was thinking about coaches experiencing burnout because that's real too. You don't have to have like a huge business, but as coaching, you can reach that point where you have built up your one-to-one practice and you've been doing so much coaching, giving that you're at risk of burnout. And so actually a useful business strategy can be to start to shift some of your practice into group or team coaching where you're supporting more people at one time, but maybe having to be in those spaces helping others less of your time. So if group or team coaching is something that you're wanting to build into your coaching business or strategy moving forwards, then our group and team coaching program could be a great fit for you.